ask you a question. You travel around the country. You give talks and you meet
Mm.
with people. You're an inspiration for many. Because of your story and because of how you overcome what you overcame. Um, do you has anyone? I mean, do you see it for yourself, or have you discussed this with anyone where that line is? Or maybe it's not a line. Maybe it's like a zone where one crosses from being a quote unquote social drinker into now an alcoholic. Like, do you remember looking back at that moment? And is there a moment, or is it something that is just always within?
Day one, right? So it is like you have that, it is like your body gets warm and the lights in your brain come on from that first sip. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is euphoria. And for me, I chased that euphoria. I'm like, this feels good. I want more of this. So therefore, I drank more alcohol, to chase that feeling. And um, that continued. And eventually, physically, your body can't process that much alcohol that quickly. And so, I'm drinking. So then my body blacks out and I shut down. But eventually, what happened to me was, there was a night right before I got sober, right before I went to treatment, where and I recently shared this on social, where I drank 2 bottles of wine by myself and I felt nothing, not buzzed, not euphoric, not happy, not sad, nothing, right? Like I couldn't feel it. It stopped. So I walked across the street from my apartment and went to a hotel bar and I sat down and I had 6 glasses of wine. The bartender's like, we're closing in 30 minutes. I was like, cool. And I drank 6 glasses of wine in 30 minutes. Right. And my defenses, they were the little ones, the little ones that you get. They're not like the big, beautiful goblets that you get at, red wine in. It was like the little ones. And so I drank 6 of them. Nothing happened, except I went home and got really sick. And in that moment, it feels like your best friend failed you. Which is the only way to describe it as someone that was in active addiction. It was like, my best friend failed me. It stopped working. This tool is broken. Like, what do I do now? And you'll hear people talk about that, saying that all of a sudden it just stopped working for them. And that's frustrating because for so long, for 15 years, I chased the next high, the next euphoria, the next excitement. And eventually it all ended in blackouts. And so I chased the numbness, And so people say, why did you drink? And it was to feel good, but also to numb at the same time because I actually didn't want to feel. And so it's the most profound and confusing thing to someone that doesn't struggle or manage this because it's like, just stop. But you can't just stop. And I've heard people say, and you alluded to this a little bit in the beginning, like it's a disease. It's not, I said it's not a disease, not a decision. But people say, well, you chose to put that wine in your mouth. You chose to, and I mean, look, if we don't all make choices, like people would be the healthiest people on the planet, right? Like everyone would eat vegetables and not smoke and not, do all the things but to at some point, like those things feel good, right? And we want to feel good. And it was just something that I could never do safely and something that never gave me the relief that I wanted.
No, that's interesting, and there is a whole debate that I am very passionately getting into with this point of, what is a choice and the whole concept of free will, et cetera, et cetera. And there's, of course, neuroscience is advancing so much, and they talk about there's experiments where they wire you up, and
Mm-hmm.
to measure your brain waves, and they figured out in the latest study that I read, they figured out that if they gave an individual two choices, A and B, both of which are appealing to the individual, and before the individual becomes aware of A
Mm-hmm.
versus B, the
Mm-hmm.
brain has already made a decision.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about 700 milliseconds before we become aware. The
Mm-hmm.
brain has already made a decision. So that question is like, well, do I really have a choice when my body is actually making decisions for me, unbeknownst to
Mm-hmm.
me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a a topic for a different
Well, isn't
for a
that, do you
different
remember the
time.
marshmallow test or the marshmallow? Is that what it is? The marshmallow experiment from the 70s?
No, I
Do you,
don't.
do you remember that? So I think it was in the 70s. So a doctor, a researcher would come in, there'd be kids, and they'd give them a marshmallow, and they'd put a marshmallow in front of them, and they'd say, you can have this now, or if you wait 5 minutes, you get two. I'm going to walk out of the room. And how many children chose the instant gratification of having one in that moment versus waiting for two? It was very small. And I forget what the predictability was for later in life, like whatever that characteristic was, or that, I think it was like, I don't remember. But yes, I mean, look that up. It's the marshmallow test. That's very interesting. Like we split decision, and most of it was based on the instant gratification.
Exactly, exactly. Let's go back to something that you said in the beginning
Hmm.
um, that I thought it was very interesting is this idea of shaming, where you said 2 to 2.5 men over every woman
Hmm.
that actually seeks help. Am I getting that right? That seeks
Yep.
help,
Seeks
from
help, seeks
addiction.
treatment. Hmm.
W- In your experience, two questions. Why do you think that is? And what can we do to improve
How long do we have? One, I don't know
Please.
that the, I don't, I mean, look, as a woman, I know that I carry the weight of a lot on my shoulders, right? Like as a single mom, as an entrepreneur, like there's a lot going on. I don't always have time to check out to get away. And so I think it's very challenging for women to let go of their responsibilities, whether it's by choice or whether it's lack of support, to get away for 30 days. And so I think that's one. I think we need to cut women a little bit more slack. And I think that we need to give them the grace that we, afford. And look, I said to you at the beginning, like I am not like an angry feminist that's like, man, but I do think there's a little bit of disparity when it comes to that. And so I don't know that women are always afforded the grace to do that. I also feel like women are, from my experience and what I've heard others share in the room, is there's a lot of shame that comes with addiction in women, specifically drinking. Even in, when, the 12-step program was, created in the 1930s, it was all men. There were very few women. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking. Man, what's her name? Oh my gosh. I'm blanking on her first name. Was one of the first. She was really the pioneer in women. This is going to drive me insane. She was the pioneer, like as far as the women's movement and recovery, and she was one of the only ones. And so she came to Congress. She really like stumped, but for advocating for change in addiction policy. And I think that there are two different ways. Like it manifests in shame in women addiction, and I think it manifests as anger in men. And so while the feeling is the same, the outward manifestation of that same feeling is different in the genders. My experience, my opinion. There's no like from what I've seen. I know I'm always so like I don't want to you know this is just my experience. And so I think that a lot of women, which right was true for me at 15 years, I still carried shame with me. And I had 15 years of sobriety. I had been doing this for 15 years, making better choices, putting myself in better situations, all of the things, but I still felt shame. And so I think there's just, I don't know. I think more women talking about it, and there's so many great women out there now talking about their recovery and talking about, really recovering out loud. And I love this. A friend of mine, Jessica Buchanan, says this. She says, I recover out loud so those that are recovering in silence can keep going. Because I was recovering in silence for a really long time, and still weren't a lot of women, there weren't a lot of women talking about it openly. And so I think, to decrease the only way we're going to change policy, I think, which is going to impact women in treatment, is to change public perception. And the only way we're going to change public perception is to have more people speaking out about it, to decrease the shame so that more people feel comfortable and know that this is a disease and not a decision. So just, we would never shame anybody for a cancer diagnosis or a diabetes diagnosis. We would support them. We would love them. We'd take them food. We visit them in the hospital, all of these things. But in my experience, when someone comes out of treatment, they're like, well, thank God you finally got help. And that's it. I think there needs to be a better community built around people coming out of treatment, whatever that looks like. Extended care. Extended care is also not built for women. Women can't go away for 90 days. Most of them, they have families, they have kids, they have responsibilities. And not to say that men don't. I think it's just different for women, and I think that makes it harder for them to seek the treatment and the help they need. So one, I think it's a time thing and a societal, the ability for women to get away for that amount of time. And I also think there's a huge still shame and stigma specifically around women. Because look, also, like, think about it. Like, women take two, a man and a woman. A woman comes home like, oh my gosh, this crazy night last night. They're like, ugh, be better. How dare you? How dare you be that promiscuous, right? A guy does the same thing. A man does the same thing. They're like, dude, you were crazy last night. How fun was that? I can't. There's just a double standard. And I don't think there should be when it comes to addiction, right? It does not discriminate when it gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. It does not discriminate. And so therefore, I don't think we should discriminate when it comes to treatment among, you know, those same demographics as well.